listening to the Hey Legal podcast.
CPD, when you want, where you want.
CPD for modern lawyers.
This free Hey Legal podcast is brought to you with the support of Caseload from De Novo Business Intelligence.
Hi, and welcome back to the Hey Legal podcast. With the ongoing pandemic of coronavirus, more and more workplaces are being forced to have their staff work from home. Coming up in this week's episode, Emma Flood from Hey Legal talks us through working from home and the mindset involved.
When people are in an office environment or at work, they're often so busy with unnecessary meetings, people coming over to their desk, attending events, that they actually find it to be really difficult to get work done at work.
Steps you can take to prepare yourself,
Maximise your time of productivity, and to maximise communication with the other members of your team.
and some rules and practices between employee and employer.
Frequency, location, required attendance at the office. Do they need to request remote working in advance? The hours that remote workers should be available? Are they expected to be available across all channels at all times?
Emma also gives us a quick roundup at the end of the episode on how this show relates to coronavirus and what you should be focusing on if you are told to self-isolate.
We actually recorded this content before the outbreak of coronavirus. Particularly relevant to self-isolating is that setting that boundary between your work life and your home life is really, really important.
A very relevant show for current affairs, so let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to Hey Legal. I'm Emma Flood from the Hey Legal team, and I'm going to talk to you about something that I have recently become quite adept at, and that is working from home. I am a freelancer, so I work with various legal organisations and law firms, and I predominantly work from home. I do have an office space where I meet clients, etc. And I go there maybe once or twice a week to get away from working from home. But actually what kind of, provoked me to create this session was that more and more of the law firms and other legal organisation clients I have worked with have actually asked me to produce content for them around how to make working from home work for their firm, or a lot of the time there have been, firms that are collections of self-employed lawyers who are trying to entice people to move into that kind of model of working. As well, if you're signed up to our newsletter, you will have seen our book recommendation of the month, which is It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. And the idea behind that book is that when people are in an office environment or at work, they're often so busy with unnecessary meetings, people coming over to their desk, attending events, things like that, that they actually find it to be really difficult to get work done at work. I certainly find that now. I used to, really like going into the office because, being at home all the time can be quite isolating. But now I find when I go into the office, I only get about half of the work done that I do when I'm at home. And I really value that time of being kind of, I say isolated, spending time completely focused on work without any kind of distraction at all. But actually, that has taken some time to get to that point, to not be distracted by things at home and to fully be able to focus on the work that you have to do. With that, let's kind of dive into the session. So why work from home as a lawyer? I suppose that remote working is actually perfect for lawyers. It's one of the most suitable areas of work because, when you're not meeting with clients, it's actually quite a solitary task, and a task that requires quite a lot of concentration. You don't need a lot of equipment to carry out legal work, and with the kind of right, communication technology and cloud-based computing, where you carry out the majority of legal work is almost irrelevant. It's very straightforward for lawyers to work from home. However, there are certain steps you can take. One, if you are someone who is considering working from home, to maximise your time of productivity and to maximise communication with the other members of your team. But also if you are a practice manager or you are in charge of a team, there are things that you can do to help support your team in remote working and actually to get more out of allowing your team to work remotely and flexibly. So I think first we should dive into establishing clear rules and practices for remote working in your firm. So there was a recent white paper produced by Nuffield Health where it was advised that employers and employees work collaboratively to determine any rules for remote working. Things like frequency, location, required attendance at the office were all highlighted as really important issues to discuss. Specific rules, I suppose, are really for your firm to determine and establish. But just as a kind of guide, some things you might want to discuss are the hours that remote workers should be available. So, for example, should they be available for their standard 9 to 5 if they start work at, a crazy time like 4 a.m. in the morning? Can they finish early, or are they expected to stick to office hours when remote working? Similarly, when remote workers are technically at work, are they expected to be available across all channels at all times? Phone, email, any WhatsApp group, online messaging. I think setting those clear communication guidelines can make sure that your team stay on the page and promote maximum productivity. So how often may members of your team work remotely? Do they need to request remote working in advance? Perhaps once a week might be optimum for some teams, or a couple of days a month, or to request remote working only when necessary. It really depends on what works. And following on the back of that, do a certain number of workers need to be in the office at any given time? Now, in places I've worked before where there have been, you're allowed to work from home 1 day a week, Monday and Friday are very popular days for people to choose to work from home. So at that point, you kind of have to establish how many members of any given team can work from home at the same time. It can really avoid difficult scenarios where there's no one to deal with a specific client issue at any time because too many people are working from home. Performance management issues as well. So home working, doesn't really lend itself to everyone. There are people who work much better in a structured office environment and don't get that same productivity benefit of being in isolation and being at home and not being bothered at their desk. So that's definitely something that you will need to look at in terms of if performance is falling below the standard you would expect. At what stage are your team members no longer allowed to work from home? And ways of tracking that and managing that. Cybersecurity practices, which we'll discuss in a bit more detail later. But how to keep your firm safe. When you're within the firm, you are very much in control of what people are doing in terms of cybersecurity, but it becomes a bit more difficult when people are working from their own home. So just making sure that everyone knows what the deal is and how to keep your firm safe. Now, as much as you are kind of establishing these rules and practices at the beginning, you want to keep reviewing them, adapting them, tweaking them, just to find that optimum balance between flexibility and productivity, and to make sure that it really continues to work for your firm. And kind of following on from that, the next thing that I wanted to discuss was actually creating a culture of positive remote working. So culture and attitude towards remote working is actually really important. A lot of the time, the kind of traditional model is people are at their desk from 8:45 and stay until all the work is done. But actually, a lack of faith in colleagues who are not in the office can be one of the biggest barriers to successful, flexible, remote working. There are people, of course, who much prefer face-to-face meetings, face-to-face supervision, and can find it really difficult to let go a little bit of that control and allow workers to, work from home and feel remote. However, making sure that the practices and rules and lines of communication that we discussed a second ago can go a long way to help build trust among your team members. Again, in that same white paper, it was highlighted that there's no obvious perfect ratio for working remotely. However, 2.5 weeks or more of working remotely can actually have a negative effect on productivity and employee relations. You can begin to feel a bit left out of the loop, a little bit left out of the team. So working remotely more than 2.5 days a week might not actually be very good for your law firm culture. Excessive remote working was said to result in the deterioration in quality of co-worker relationships, and that remote working colleagues could become the subject of resentment from employees that are based in the office. Culture is a massively important part of any workplace, and it does. You can see how that could happen within workplaces where people think that because someone is not physically in the office that they're not working, or that they're slacking off, or when they don't reply to an email right away that they are off out having brunch rather than being at their desk. But when you're looking at these policies and procedures for remote working, it's really important to consider the impact of any change, just in the dynamic of your team as well as in productivity.
Join the Hey Legal community. Follow us on Twitter at @Hey_legal.
So, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, we actually recorded this content before the outbreak of coronavirus and before so many people were being asked to self-isolate. I think in hindsight, looking at the content of the podcast, it was a lot of it is really useful advice, but I think picking out something that is particularly relevant to self-isolating is that setting that boundary between your work life and your home life is really, really important, especially for motivation and productivity, as well as for your own sanity at this point. I've certainly done it, kind of merged home life and work life, and you're in a state of kind of constantly working. So starting your work day early, but intermingling it with, tidying up, putting the washing on, doing that kind of thing. And you never really get time off or time on. You always feel constantly unproductive, but like you're constantly working. So I think really set your working hours and keep it separate. Say 6 p.m, I finish work and my home life begins. I hope that you found the content really useful, especially if you are someone who would not choose to work from home, and that you take away something useful if you do have to self-isolate over the coming weeks or months. And also an excellent time to catch up on CPD learning if you are interested in Hey Legal and doing some of your CPD while you're stuck at home. That'd be great. Let us know if there's anything that we can record for you that you particularly find useful at this time, and you'll be hearing from me again very soon. Thank you for listening to this Hey Legal podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. To hear the full CPD qualifying content, please visit heylegal.co.uk to subscribe and join our community. Or you could ask your law firm to contact us for a firm-wide subscription. Learn more, be more with Hey Legal.